I'm Matt Miller.
And I'm Hannah Elliott, and this is Hot Pursuit.
All right, we finally get to talk about the 911 hybrid that you drove.
Finally.
And I'm excited to talk about that because you know how much I loved the hybrid Corvette that I drove. They're different animals, but they're inevitably going to be compared, and I think it's exciting. I also want to talk about a couple of Roadsters that I've driven back-to-back. One, the Mercedes-AMG SL63 was over $200,000, but it is a two-door, four-seater convertible with a V8. And now this week I'm driving another two-door, four-seater convertible with a V8 that costs substantially less, the Mustang GT. It's only $60,000, and I feel like it's a lot more fun than the Merc.
I am not surprised to hear you say that in the least.
But we'll get to that.
This tracks.
We also are going to cover the Rivian, not only the Rivian deal with Volkswagen, but more interestingly, like a deep dive into the origin story of Rivian and the CEO personally, RJ Scaringe, and how he's run this business kind of in obscurity for most of the time he's been doing it. And now, like all of a sudden he was a massive success, and then now kind of a stock market failure. We have Max Chafkin from Businessweek to talk to us about that. So let's get straight to the 911. Now you can tell us the embargo is lifted. How was it?
You know what? It was awesome, and the hybrid was the least interesting thing about it. It's kind of like a nothing burger. It's like, yeah, it's slightly faster. It's slightly more powerful. I would challenge you to get in that car blindfolded and tell me that you know it's a hybrid. The GTS, of course, is an existing line in the 911 portfolio. This new GTS, it happens to have lost a turbocharger and gained an e-motor that they've attached to a single bigger turbocharger that's got them a little bit more horsepower. It's got them a little quicker speed, 0 to 60. But honestly, this is going to be like a 911 that you know and love already. It's firmly in the middle of the lineup, handles great. There are some differences in the cabin, though, that I would say those to me were bigger deals than what's under the hood. Starting with, they've removed the faux key on the ignition. So instead of on the left side turning the key, it's now a push button start.
That's weak sauce.
Which too, I mean, I think they had announced that that was going to be the case, but I hadn't realized that. And I get in the car and I go to turn it on and there's nothing there. And I'm hitting the dashboard and then I realize, oh, it's a button. It was shocking.
I would prefer, frankly, and maybe it's just a sign of my age, I would prefer to have a real key that you put in the ignition to the left of the steering wheel. It would solve a lot of the problems I have at parking garages. I always forget to leave the key for the attendant. And also, it's like a cool way of mechanically interacting with your vehicle, but I guess they don't really care about that.
More people care for sure. And I did ask Frank Moser about it from Porsche, and he said, look, if enough people hate it, maybe we can go back and take it out for another generation and put in the faux key again, but I doubt it. The other thing I think that really, you tell me how you feel about this. They've removed the back seat. So now for 911 Carrera and Carrera GTS models, the back seat does not come standard. You can select it as a no-cost option, but if you do not make that selection in the configurator, no back seat for you. How do you feel about that?
I don't love it. I mean, I'll say this. It looks cool to me if I see a car like a 911 that has no back seat. I think it's cool when people option no back seat in that vehicle. But I think the back seat should be standard. It's part of the history of 911 that it has 4 seats, right? The back seats weren't really usable anyway, except for in a pinch. And I had a 911 for a long time. There are times when you just have to squeeze another person in the car, and it helps to have that. If you don't have a back seat, it makes it really a lot more illegal to drive somebody around in the back in most jurisdictions, right? And also, it's like a nice place to rest things. They look good.
They do look good.
I think, unless you're going for like the racier, like GT3 look with the half cage, I think I'd rather have seats.
Yeah. This to me feels like a very brilliant cost-cutting move by Porsche. And if there's anybody who can cut costs, it's a Schwabian,
That is
because
very
they know that people will freak out if you have to pay more for a back seat. So, but they also know that most people, they may not select it. If you have to actually push a button and select it and go through the whole thing, maybe people won't select it. So it's like they can save some money on installing seats that nobody wants anyway, quote unquote, but they save themselves the public uproar of this huge announcement that now they're going to charge you for something that you didn't used to have to pay for. So
right.
it seems very clever.
There's so many 2+2s that are doing it now.
Yeah.
You know, from the lowly Dodge Challenger, they offer a no-cost option to get rid of the seats in a lot of those trim levels, to the, I noticed the new AMG GT either comes standard with no back seats or can be optional with no back seats. Of course, the new AMG GT now is a 4-seater like the SL63. But I guess those are cost-cutting measures, and I've noticed them coming at Porsche for a long time. They dropped the emergency brake. They dropped the key in the ignition, and now they dropped the back seat. Now they're getting rid of actual gauges. I mean, all of these wonderful little luxury touches, they don't really give you anymore.
Yeah.
Those things bugged you about it. What about the gauges? What did you think about the experience
so that's a really good
without
question.
the gauges?
You know, I think it's going to use that word again. I think it's going to be a little bit polarizing because now the cabin in the 911 has no analog gauges. There is a curved screen behind the steering wheel where the 5 gauges used to be with the tack in the center. That is now replicated on a screen digitally. And then there's a screen in the dashboard. So this truly is the most, you could definitely argue it's the most modern version of the 911 for sure. It's like pure screens now. Obviously, this goes back to just what we were speaking about before with the whole, I'm not convinced screens are going to age amazingly well. And I know that I'm not the only one because Bentley just announced that their Chiron successor, the Tourbillon, very deliberately is mostly analog on the inside. And it's because they think that this car will look better on concours lawns, 50 years from now with analog gauges rather than computer screens. And I kind of agree.
I mean, look, this is another case of corporate decisions that are good for the bottom line in quarterly earnings, but are bad longer term. You know that Oliver Bluma also knows screens aren't going to age well. You know that Frank also knows that screens aren't going to age well. Everyone knows that screens aren't going to age well because they never have. Look back at cars that have screens in the last 10 or 20 years, and they look horrible. And Porsche knows they're going to look horrible in the future, but they put them in to sell them now and to make the bottom line, the quarterly earnings look better. And I just think they'll rue. Well, no, I don't think they'll rue that decision. The buyers will, but it doesn't matter because as long as the stock does well, I'm not complaining about capitalism. But
and you know what? The car drives amazingly.
I'm sure it's phenomenal.
So
now, the thing is, Porsche never had a problem with responsiveness anyway, but in the Corvette, the addition of the electric motor on the Corvette is on the front axle really helps it instantly accelerate. Porsche already did that, but do you not hear any of the electric motor at all? Do you not hear any of the sort of fighter jet whir?
Honestly, I did not. Maybe when you get in the car, you will hear it. I truthfully did not hear it. I don't know if I could have gotten in and without seeing anything, known that I was in a hybrid. I didn't. Maybe you'll get in and hear something that I didn't hear, but no, it's really imperceptible.
I have bad hearing.
And let's not forget, this is a mild hybrid. It's not a plug-in. There's no electric-only driving. So, it really is a very, very subtle change, a subtle advance, if you will.
All right. So I just want to finally ask about the biggest omission of all and hear your take on it, because the GTS was the trim line that you could get with a stick shift. That was the true driver's car. Someone who cares about driving a car really and doesn't want to use flappy paddles went for the GTS so that he didn't have to, or she didn't have to have the turbocharged engine and the automatic transmission. Now Porsche is not offering any stick shifts in the 2025 model line. And definitely not in the GTS, not even next year in the GTS, right? It's not coming.
Not in the
GTS.
Vehicle. Not in the GTS.
So how do you think that does for this trim level, which you chose for the stick?
Well, times are changing. Now the trim level is the hybrid thing. I asked them about that too. They of course say, just wait. There are other variants coming out. There are other things happening. Just wait, just wait. So I'm fully confident that we'll have other opportunities to be in manual 992.2 vehicles. If you ask my opinion, yeah, it'd be nice just to have the option of a manual, just like we always say. But honestly, frankly, at least I can say I don't need a manual. And I'm assuming that probably most drivers who drive an hour to work every day, if they're driving their 911 for that purpose, I'm sure that they're very happy to have those flappy paddles.
Yeah, I guess maybe commuters don't necessarily. I just know that I have usually more fun in a manual
for sure
than I do.
Well, I love the ST. I mean, that was like my favorite car.
Sure. But of course, you have to have $100,000 more, and you have to be on a list. Yeah. And all right, so I think I like the design of the 992.2 a lot. So I think it looks better than the 992.1. But
I like it.
Yeah. So all right, awesome. You should check out on Bloomberg.com Hannah's article on the new 911 GTS after she got to go to Marbella to drive it. I want to quickly talk about these two Roadsters because I had I think pretty high hopes for the Mercedes-AMG SL63.
63.
And in some ways it delivers. I mean, it's an extremely powerful V8 that sounds amazing. Obviously, there's no stick available for this either because Mercedes has just abandoned that customer. But it's like the same as the GT now. The AMG GT is just the hardtop version, and the SL63 is the ragtop. I like a ragtop. They both have 4 seats, unless you option the back seat out. They both have all-wheel drive now, which they never had before. And I like all-wheel drive. I don't mind if it's heavy. It's a Grand Tour. It's not supposed to be a sports car. But I will say the price at over $200,000, I'd probably rather have a Porsche, and the responsiveness is not there. There's for some reason, just a ton of turbo lag. You put down the pedal and you can start counting before the engine spools up and goes. And then everything is operated by the screen. And I don't know why they do this. I guess because they start designing the car 5 years ago and then they come out with it last year. But even putting the top up and down, you pretty much have to use the screen. I figured out a cheat. If you double push a button, you can do it. But it's not great in that sense. But I'm not going to be disappointed with a $200,000 car, right? It's luxury.
I mean,
it's luxury?
I would say it's luxury.
The seats are leather.
Yeah.
The design looks cool.
I mean, Mercedes to me has the most luxurious interiors of before you get into Rolls-Royce range.
It wasn't for me comfortable, but I have a weird body type. But the seats, I'm just not getting a lot of leg room, and I was more comfortable in the Corvette, which is a weird thing to say. And also, by the way, don't ever test drive a sports car or a GT car after you drove the Corvette E-Ray, because that thing was more responsive. It was accelerating before my foot touched the pedal, and this thing and anything else isn't compared to that. But so I still really enjoyed driving it for a week. But then last night I got into this Ford Mustang, not even the dark horse. It was the GT, the convertible, not even the manual transmission. I don't know what the PR is thinking when they give a journalist, the automatic. But it's cool that I got to compare it back to back with the Mercedes because they're both automatic. As I said, 2-door 4-seaters with V8s. It's a blast. It's so much fun. Yeah. And it only costs $60,000.
Wow.
The sound is much more offensive in a good way. Like a high schooler would be super psyched to drive this car. The top goes down faster and easier, less complicated.
It just sounds simple and easy.
Because it's rear-wheel drive. I could break the back wheels loose on every highway entry and exit. It's just like a hooligan's car. And I also take issue with people now who say it's just a sports car, the Mustang. It's no longer a muscle car. It really feels muscle. Oh. You can feel the engines in the front. It's a heavy vehicle. I think it's a 4,000-pound vehicle, and it's cheap and fast.
How was the sound system?
The sound system on both is okay. Neither one's great. The Mercedes has the Burmester, and people rave about it, but it's not that great, frankly. And on the Mustang, it's the first time that I really felt like, yes, I don't need to listen to the radio because I only want to listen to the motor. Like this morning I drove to work. It was raining. I still put the top down and didn't listen to the radio on my commute.
I think you just unlocked another level. I think you just reached another plateau.
It could be. I hate it when people say that, because I like a good stereo, and I'm sure if I lived with the car, I'd want a good stereo. And to be honest, almost no factory stereo is good. So I'm sure it's not that great. But the vehicle is just a blast to drive. It makes you feel like a little kid again, is the thing. It makes me, 50-year-old Matt Miller, feel like, an 18-year-old kid.
Yeah, you're smiling, and there is something to be said for you can get a whole lot of car and have, it sounds like, just as much fun with something a lot cheaper and a lot simpler and just something just easy. So why go through the expense of getting the big expensive thing? I can relate to that.
I don't know.
Makes perfect sense.
And frankly, now that I've driven both, when I see somebody in a Mercedes-AMG SL63, I'm going to be kind of making a character judgment,
Oh boy.
You could have had maybe more fun spending $60,000, but you felt it necessary to spend $209,000? The suspension is another thing that, it's not amazing on the Mustang GT either, but I thought it was going to be insane on the Mercedes-AMG SL63. It was bouncy. I go to work at 5 in the morning, so I fly down the Bronx River Parkway and then even faster down the West Side Highway. And okay, the roads aren't
great. Were you in sport mode, Sport Plus? Are you sure that you're not in comfort?
I was only in Sport Plus and track.
We got to make sure.
In the Mercedes.
Okay.
Yeah. And, I don't stay in track because that keeps the gears really low when you don't need it. So Sport Plus I find it good. But the suspension was just bouncy in that car. And I was surprised because I thought it was going to be much better. In the Mustang, I didn't have such high expectations,
The counterpoint to that is if you were just coming out of a Corvette, that is a pretty stiff suspension and a pretty stiff car. So probably to get into anything would feel rather... That's
true.
Looser.
I thought about that as well, but the Corvette suspension is so good that you don't... It's not bouncy and... it's not too jarring, it's not, I wasn't breaking teeth in it. So it's not like my neighbor has this BMW M4 GTS. That thing, like if you even think about hitting a speed bump, it hurts already. You feel like you might have broken something in the car. Or like a 911 GT3, right? You don't want to be in that car on a regular basis if you value your spine. The Corvette, it was perfect.
Now, I need to change the subject a little bit and ask you a very pressing question.
Yes.
This has to do with buying used cars or, more euphemistically vintage cars. I found myself out at Beverly Hills Car Club, which is neither in Beverly Hills nor a car club. It's out in the hood. Oh, yeah.
Oh, my God. I've always thought that's like the Manhattan Classic Car Club.
No.
I've always thought that's where people gather that love cars and test different vehicles.
No. These cars are very much caveat emptor vehicles. You have to assume all risk when you go there, but it's just fun to look around.
For 20 years, I've been looking at cars and I thought, wow, they have such a good collection. The members must really appreciate it.
Yeah. This question goes right in line with what I'm trying to say is I did see a very cool Rolls-Royce variant there. And priced to sell.
Yeah.
The one thing is the trunk doesn't open. So how do you feel about purchasing a vehicle, priced accordingly, I should say, but the trunk doesn't open? And this brings up two things. What's in the trunk, number one?
Yes.
And number two, are you going to want some storage space in that trunk at some point?
But don't you think you would eventually be able to open the trunk? Can you get into a Rolls-Royce trunk through the back seats or?
No, I don't think so. No, not this one. Yes, once purchased, I could, take it down to Charlie and see if you can crack it open. For
I mean,
sure.
I wouldn't care if it's priced
You wouldn't care.
accordingly. That's the trunk opening is the least of my worries in buying a car like that. I would be much more concerned about the maintenance cost. What are you going to have to repair? How much is it going to cost you to run every year? The trunk, I don't even care. Like, you have a big back seat and you don't have any buddy necessarily to put back there except for the dogs. So yeah. I think.
I kind of like looking in the trunk, though, and pulling up the upholstery to look, to see what's been spray painted over and what has,
you're a good
what
car
has
buyer.
Rusted, or,
That's true.
what has been, quote unquote, fixed. It is a really good indicator if there's been any incidents
That's a good
in the
point.
car. Is there Bondo? That sort of thing. So there's a little bit of a risk. Right. But you're saying, never mind.
It wouldn't bother me. I would probably tell the good people that run the Beverly Hills Car Club, I would like to buy this car. Is there any way for you to figure out how to open the trunk? Like, can we get a crowbar and pry this baby open?
Yeah.
Because
let's figure it out together.
I saw another
Could
car.
be a suitcase of money
cash,
in there.
Or drugs,
Yeah.
even. Did you read the Keith Richards autobiography?
Life? My life? Yes.
It's an amazing story. And he gets pulled over in a car that's packed with cocaine, and the cops don't even get to
his
it.
Bentley? Didn't he drive?
No.
Didn't he say in that book a Bentley saved his life multiple times because he crashed it? He would crash him, and
he did. But the car he was driving across the U.S. when he got pulled over, like in the middle of the country with a drug-filled vehicle, was not a Bentley. And he actually, I think, got out of it because the judge was a Stones fan. But I highly recommend that book. Especially for car people, because there's a lot about vehicles. The Beverly Hills Car Club also had a Bentley Continental R, which, I lust after those. I think it was 1993.
I know.
Those at the time was, I think, the most expensive car you could buy, and it looked beautiful to me. Only $22,000, but that's probably because it's gonna cost you like $50 a year to run. I noticed in that one also there were actually holes cut in the trunk. Did you see that?
No, I didn't look through all the photos. No.
Yeah.
No. I didn't open the trunk on that one either. I did see that car, of course, but no. So that's interesting.
All right. Well, I learned a lot today. Let's learn a little bit more about Rivian. We have Bloomberg Businessweek reporter Max Chafkin. He's going to join us to talk about his story with Ed Ludlow on Rivian. Let's listen in.
Max, it's so good to have you here. You wrote a really fabulous story about Rivian, and really, I thought, put into great relief how Rivian has emerged as kind of the antithesis to Tesla, and maybe even RJ is the antithesis to Elon. And I think, too, we've talked about how there's a product story and there's a business story. So I'd love to just hear from you how you see that play out for Rivian.
Look, coming from the outside, and I'm not like even a car person, although I do own 2 cars. But, from my point of view, coming from the outside of this story, you have kind of a product story and a stock story. And that's true actually at Tesla as well. But, the product, this luxury pickup truck and very large SUV, has built a sizable following. I think, you can debate like how good is it on its own terms? Is it really a good value? But like they're selling actually like a substantial quantity of these things, selling more than, comparative cars. It's like a solid business in a lot of ways. It has fans. There's this interesting culture of fandom where you have lots of like kind of disaffected Tesla owners, people who own a Tesla but are really excited about a Rivian because it doesn't necessarily come with all the baggage of Elon Musk or whatever. And then you have a stock story and a business story that has just been essentially disastrous for years, right? This is a company went public 2021. I think in retrospect, kind of the very height of the kind of pandemic-fueled bubble in EVs. For like a hot second there in like November 2021, it was the most valuable or second most valuable car company in the United States. And it just has gone like pretty much straight down until very recently striking this deal with Volkswagen. But even with the deal that is struck with Volkswagen, the stock's still down like 90%. It's been a disaster, which is kind of interesting because, on one hand, you would think that like Elon Musk going out there and kind of making a fool of himself on social media and doing all sorts of things that have undermined Tesla, that would create a real opportunity for Rivian. And it has, although I don't know that Rivian has fully managed to take advantage of that opportunity just yet.
Well, they can't, because they can't, they can't produce as many cars. Let's put some numbers on it, right? Tesla is going to sell roughly 2 million cars this year.
Right.
Rivian is going to sell what, like 50,000?
Something like that. Yeah. And now I think it's slightly what they would say is, it's actually not quite as bad as it sounds because we had to shut down the factory for retooling. Of course, Tesla has lots of excuses that they offer like that. But yeah, it's essentially like
But they'll sell maybe 50, 60 tops.
Yeah, totally.
Last year they sold 50, 60 tops.
Yep.
And Tesla is going to sell 2 million, give or take. Last year they sold 2 million, give or take. By the way, Tesla's worth $900 billion. Rivian at its height was worth $150 billion. Right. And they've been literally decimated, like the definition of that. They're worth 1/10 of what they had been. So, I mean...
So why the space between they do have a fan base and the stock? Why is there such a big divide?
I have to think part of it, Max, is that they just can't make enough. Like, if they could make more, they could sell more. So production is a huge problem for them.
Well, okay, so I think really, and this is true, I mean, doing this story, and, I also, we post a podcast, Elon Inc., which we talk about this every week. It's a sister podcast, if you will, of Hot Pursuit. Sorry,
nice.
I had to get the plug in.
I like that.
But anyway, we talk about this all the time, and I think really, like, the EV market, like, everyone kind of agrees. Policymakers, governments, probably like there's some automotive enthusiasts who would beg to differ, but like essentially this is the future. Like all the cars are going to go this way. By 2030 or whatever in certain states and localities, like you're not going to be able to sell a conventional car.
We hope that's not true and that those things change. But
just
to be clear.
My point is though, that's the goal. A lot of people kind of agree on that goal, but like getting there, there's a gulf, and the gulf is essentially affordability. And like, I think what happened with Rivian, yes, the production issues are a problem, and that's part of the reason they're losing so much money, is that they have this like giant factory that's an old Mitsubishi factory in central Illinois, and like it has a capacity of 150,000 vehicles. They're making 50, 60, like you said. That's creating losses. But the real problem is they're selling a minimum $70,000 3-row SUV, and there is just like a limited audience in a world with high interest rates, and where there's a bit of a backlash against EVs. Where I think about this in my own life, right? Because like I drove, I drove the truck, and I think it's awesome. I think it's cool. It made me wanna drive it. Maybe it can accelerate really fast. Like I'm not.
It's luxurious.
Yeah, it reminded me.
No, it's not.
I'm gonna reveal.
I thought you didn't want to talk about the product, Hannah.
Okay,
We can talk about the product. I just didn't want to start with that.
Okay, well, I have a point here, which is essentially though, when I actually started thinking about it, you're talking about, like I said, minimum 70,000, so probably more like 80, whatever, 85. There's going to be some tax credits, but like this is a big chunk of change, and you could get a really nice brand new Lexus for like $20,000 less than that. And with that also has 3 rows, and that is a Toyota product. It's going to be easy to and it's just like, even if you're in the
market,
with
a gas engine, to be clear.
Yeah,
right?
with a gas engine, yeah. But I mean, the point is just that like, unless you are the kind of like early adopter, you're going for this no matter what. They just haven't been affordable enough.
Yeah, I would say just because something is priced like a luxury product doesn't mean that it actually is a luxury product. And just because it has a lot of tech doesn't mean it's a luxury product.
Yeah.
What is a luxury product? And when you think of a luxury product,
I would say when materials are what they seem to be, for instance, leather is real leather, chrome is real chrome, wood is real wood, when they're handmade in small batches or smallish batches, and when they're well made, when the fit and finish is very well made, when there are no body panels that don't align, when you can't pull the covering on the B and C pillars literally down, when something is well made, that for starters.
I like that. I like that definition. But Max, I'm with you. I think this is a luxury vehicle just because the design is so special. It's so powerful. there's an exclusivity because A, they're difficult to afford for most people, and B, you just can't get them. There's a long waiting list. And they've got features. They have features. I know. I'm not. So this isn't Hannah's definition.
Items.
Anyway, I think it's cool.
That's a better
going for. Maybe that's a better way to say it.
Cool doesn't mean luxury.
Okay, fair.
Cool exists outside of the luxury world for sure.
Fair.
And just because they can't make enough doesn't make them exclusive. It just means Rivian can't make enough.
But the way I think of it, right, is that for a long time, the narrative from Elon Musk, even like Bob Lutz, former CEO of GM, who was a big proponent of EVs, like the idea was EVs are going to be a complete change from the automotive status quo because they are fundamentally software products. They're not going to be like cars. You're only going to care about the software that's in it. And like I remember like working at magazines and being involved in articles where we're like, the car is the new iPhone. And you see that.
Well, Elon said that.
100%.
Elon told me that in person, when he still was driving around with early prototypes.
Right.
And I didn't really get it.
Well, you can understand why that's a good story for investors, because iPhones are, the software business is like way better than the car business. Software valuations are way better than automotive valuations. So if that turns out to be true, right, Tesla is worth, gazillion dollars. Like Cathie Wood, you're talking like Cathie Wood potentially like $30 trillion. I think that's the latest, the latest kind of like pie in the sky thing.
Has she said 30 trillion?
Yeah. And Elon is always like, when I think about what the best valuation is, it's the Cathie Wood thing. I mean, we should check the numbers, but pretty sure 30 trillion. But anyway, Rivian's bet is different. Rivian's bet is that the car industry of the future is going to look a lot like car industry of the past. There are going to be different demographics, different styles. There's going to be a Jeep equivalent. There's going to be the Jeep of EVs or the Subaru of EVs. And to my mind, like that's what they're trying to build. When you look at like what the branding is, it looks like the way that Jeep or Subaru are marketing products. And there's even, I got kind of like into the sort of Rivian fan community because it's so funny. It's like a funny inversion of the Tesla fan community. You imagine like the typical Cybertruck driver. It's like it's a total like alpha bro, super into technology, super into self-driving, and like the Rivian people are like a little bit boring.
Patagonia.
They're like, yeah, they got their fleece maybe. But anyway,
I feel like both camps are wearing Patagonia fleece.
They are, just differently.
Because one is a programmer and the other one is like a regional banker.
But like the thing, Rivian, so like the Jeep wave, right? There's a Rivian equivalent. They wave at each other and they can't even help themselves. It's just like the thing. And I think like that is pretty astute, honestly, of Rivian, and it actually shows like if Elon Musk's bet on the future of the automotive industry is correct, then great. It's going to be then like he's totally going to pay off this valuation. But I think it's a high risk bet, and more likely it's the Rivian thesis is going to be the one that plays out. And if happens,
they can survive,
the one problem with that is if that happens, like Tesla's worth way less, like the ceiling is a little bit lower, and that makes it harder for Rivian. They're trying to compete in a business that is cutthroat, where there's lots of competition, where it's not just Tesla and Rivian. There are lots of other really solid EVs either on the market or about to hit the market. So that's a challenge. Although I think
in terms of non-incumbents, there isn't really another competitor that's made a substantial amount of vehicles, right?
No, they're and when you look at the thing is they get lumped in with like Lucid and Fisker,
like Canoe,
companies that are like
Bollinger,
either like literally Fisker's bankrupt. Lucid is around, but it's like largely around thanks to the largesse of
Saudis,
the Saudi.
They both. Well, Rivian had its Saudi largesse too. So
okay, but
let's talk about that. For a second.
We should talk about
the VW.
Let's get the origin story, because I think that's a cool part of your reporting.
The thing about this is like Rivian, this is an unlikely story, and I mean it's easy to like see this, he sort of looks like a typical kind of programmer type or something. He's like, sort of like a attractive white man of about 40 years old who went to MIT. This is an unlikely story. RJ Scaringe basically was like stringing it together for many years, pivoting between various.
That was Mainstream Motors.
Yeah, it was Mainstream
Right?
Motors. Mainstream
Yeah.
Motors, by the way, his father is an engineer and an entrepreneur. Runs a company that's like Mainstream Engineering or something. It's a defense contractor. So his original investor was his father. Their Saudi investor. It's not quite as glamorous as the Public Investment Fund. It is
True.
It is a company best known for operating Toyota dealerships in Saudi Arabia. Which look like, I mean, I've never been to Saudi Arabia, but I am in the Middle East, and if you have that Toyota franchise,
Hell yes.
that is a valuable thing. But it's like it was like an MIT connection. It wasn't. This is a company that really strung it together just barely. And I mean, the way it's pretty funny. I mean, part of the reason they had this really successful launch in 2018, I think part of it was the design. Like you brought it up. I think it's polarizing. Like I don't totally love it. In fact, a lot of people who like Rivian are not like exactly crazy about the front end.
I love it.
But it's memorable.
Polarizing is good, really, for car design.
I
Yeah,
love
At least it evokes a reaction.
People talk about it.
Totally.
Yeah.
Polarizing is better than than an appliance.
But anyway, Rihanna came to the launch. Why did Rihanna come to the launch? Well, she was dating the son of the Saudi car dealer. They've broken up, by the way. But like that.
But she did her part.
And like, okay, Rivian gets this investment from Jeff Bezos. Well, we don't know exactly the chain of events that led to that investment, but I can tell you that Rivian hired a production company. Production company had some connections to Jeff. The production company hired Lauren Sanchez, Jeff Bezos's girlfriend, to do some aerial
Fiancé.
photography. And
By the way, dude, jack of all trades. Lauren Sanchez, I thought, was like a journalist and a television reporter. Turns out she does aerial photography.
that was the business.
Crazy.
I believe. Now, again, I'm speaking out of turn here, but I believe that's how she and Jeff Bezos
She's
met.
a helicopter pilot.
Yeah, helicopter pilot.
That is awesome.
She was doing the same thing for Blue Origin. But in any case, Bezos finds out about this and really becomes, the key. I mean, that is a thing that sends Rivian essentially stratospheric, because not only did Bezos put a huge amount of money in the company, but made this big order, 100,000 delivery vans. They haven't delivered all of those yet, by the way, but like becomes both a sort of keystone customer and the beginning investor. And company goes public, and as I said, just manages to raise a ton of money, but kind of like the same factors that were sort of propelling Rivian to be able to tell this investor story also worked against it. So part of the reason Rivian did well, because cars were really expensive. Like a Toyota Camry is like selling for like more than $40,000. So, and interest rates are zero. So like, who cares? Like YOLO, like why buy a $70,000 pickup truck? Why not? Now, of course, the reason those cars were so expensive is that semiconductors were really hard to come by. RJ had overpaid for almost everything. He had over-designed these trucks, love them or hate them. Like when you look at people did teardowns, and like it was constructed in a very expensive way. There were all these like little add-ons that I think helped contribute to the sort of memorability or whatever of the truck, but ultimately made it very expensive to manufacture. And they priced it, basically before they realized like how much it was going to cost. So they were just like selling these things, losing tons of money, and then unable, because of the semiconductor shortage, to really get ramped up as quickly as they wanted. And so you have a company that is essentially burning through like $5 billion a year, which is a lot. I mean, I haven't gone back and looked like how much did Tesla burn when they were making the Model S, but it's kind of like the burn you would expect for like a mass market vehicle, not a kind of niche vehicle.
Right. Ford lost less on their EV business.
So so they had I think some real like undeniable success, especially when you look at like how hard it's been for like every other one of these EV startups to build any kind of following. Like Fisker had a lot of legs up on. He's like a famous designer. He's been in the industry for a very long time, like really struggling. Like all these startups, upstarts, like really struggling to get any kind of traction. Rivian gets traction, but at just a crazy high price. Like one thing you can say about RJ and Rivian, like this is a spendy company. It is not like Elon Musk is really frugal and it comes out in all sorts of ways that are destructive and problematic. Rivian, RJ, I think, believed that the company needs to sort of overperform. It needs to be better than you expect. It needs to be nicer than you expect. These Rivian stores are really expensive and nice, and it's very different from a lot of things Tesla did. And, as a result, like behind the scenes, starting last year, there's this like kind of frantic attempt to either raise more money or cut costs or all of those things. Like they looked at the federal government, and then we wind up finally, with this Volkswagen deal, which really is a lifeline. And I think
that saved them completely. I mean, let's talk about how massive that was.
Now, did it save them completely, or is it a lifeline that's going to last a year? I mean, they still have to build
is that really a
factory
defensive move against Tesla? More than appreciating what Rivian is doing or could do, is that actually a maneuver to block Tesla?
Well, I think no. I mean, I think Rivian, despite having the kind of crazy burn rate, and despite as RJ said, looking out in the future and seeing at some point, we're going to run out of money. They have something valuable here, I think, and
but
so
Max, they have a lot of liabilities. Like they have to build another factory for $5 billion.
Right. Well,
they have to hire 6,000 people. Like they have more spending to do than that Volkswagen Lifeline will amount to.
Yeah,
right?
and we reported, we haven't even talked about the UAW, but of course the UAW's out there. Rivian looks like a pretty successful EV company, especially compared to, Fisker and even like some of the big automakers. UAW badly wants to unionize those plants. The plant in Normal, Illinois, not unionized. And so part of what kind of set off this chain of events that led to VW, as we report in the story, Rivian had agreed during the good old days to build this massive factory in Georgia. $5 billion, said they had huge commitments of sort of jobs that they had to create to pay for the infrastructure that Georgia was going to provide. As these deals often do, the local government, state government kicks in money, but the private employer has to do something. And RJ and Rivian essentially tried to apply for a loan from the Department of Energy as part of the Inflation Reduction Act. Biden administration is, as we know, like super excited about promoting EVs, but the Biden administration also very pro-union. And that's kind of where the hiccup happened. And that was part of the decision for RJ essentially to put a pause on Georgia and try to do this new model in Illinois. He got another big tax incentive in Illinois, 800 or so million, but that was leaving this kind of like bomb over the company where at some point they're going to run out of money. They have these commitments. So that's where kind of Volkswagen comes in. And, Ed Ludlow, my co-writer, and I, we talked to RJ about this, and essentially he's talking to everybody, right? He's trying to, whatever, potential partners, money, whatever, and has this conversation with Volkswagen, with the new CEO, Oliver Bloom, and initially thinks, okay, like maybe we're going to like sell them some technology or something. But over the course of, some amount of time, it becomes clear that Volkswagen is interested in something deeper, a real like partnership, essentially where Volkswagen is going to take Rivian's software and hardware and put it into its vehicles. And that's interesting because, Volkswagen under the previous CEO made this huge bet on EVs, and it has not worked. I think it's I forget what it's called, ID4. The owners of this car are just
disappointed,
really complaining a lot about the software. It's needing a reboot. It doesn't work. EVs, as we've talked about, are software, and that's despite the fact that they had spent a really large amount of money developing their own software, trying to make this work.
They spent $30 billion just to start the software unit. They earmarked 108 billion euros between like now and 2028 on EVs.
So, and when I talk about, in terms of this Rivian deal, I'm not talking about like infotainment software. I'm talking about the software architecture and the computers on the inside of the car. So, the thing that tells the doors or the seat or the steering or whatever, right? Cars are many of these little computers. And Rivian had spent a lot of time and money essentially aping Tesla. Tesla has their own system. Rivian built its own system at, I assume, great expense. And the idea here is that they're going to license the computers and the software to Volkswagen. That's going to give them up to $5 billion. Now, again, this is a partnership between a kind of shaky startup and a very old German.
The most German of the Germans.
Yeah, not necessarily like it's going to all work out, but assuming it does.
Two companies that like to spend like drunken sailors,
It'll give Rivian, a substantial amount of money, $5 billion, which is enough money to at least get that Georgia plant open, and they've said get R2, the next car, into production. I think the hope would be to then start getting ready for R3, which is the even cheaper version. And for Volkswagen, it allows them to just like take this stuff and put it into their future models. The great thing for Rivian is Volkswagen is going to be a lot better at sourcing some semiconductor parts than Rivian, and they're going to be buying essentially from the same pool because it's going to be a joint venture. So suddenly this gives like Rivian a lot more leverage in terms of buying these very expensive, very hard to get parts, and that could also help them, trim losses going forward. That what they want to do is get to profitability by the end of the year.
What do you make of, former VW and Porsche employees going to Rivian? I know we spoke about this briefly.
Yeah.
For instance, Kellgruner, the head of Porsche North America, shortly after his departure from Porsche, now we see him at Rivian. How do you assess that type of move?
I don't know, to be honest. My assumption is kind of like small world type of situation, or maybe they're, I don't know how many potential homes there are for this kind of person. But on the other hand, like, look, Rivian has big plans. I mean, this is not a viable company at 50 or 60,000 units a year. It's not a viable company if it's only selling vans to Amazon and not to other commercial clients. It's not a viable company if it doesn't have, really, it needs several new models. And so, that requires staffing up. And there's also been some, interestingly, like some former Rivian people over at VW. So, I mean, who knows? Maybe it's evidence that some kind of cross-pollination, maybe that even helped drive this deal. But we definitely didn't get any of that indication from Rivian. Just speculating on my part.
Just on a personal level, I'm curious what your opinion is of RJ, especially in light of Elon. You cover Elon so much, and, RJ received basically, funded by his dad and 15 years working in total obscurity. Does RJ have what it takes? Does he have, like him or hate him, what Elon has?
Yeah, I mean, I tweeted that like Rivian's like a thought experiment of a company. I used a foul term, but like, what would Tesla look like if it didn't have a trollish CEO? And I think that cuts both ways. I think in certain ways, it's really good, right? Like I think that you could go back and look at where has Tesla gone wrong, and I think clearly you all may have different views of this, but I think Cybertruck, huge misstep, years late. The design is like you said, polarizing is good, but maybe a little bit too polarizing, And if they had just done something more conservative, easier to make, I think they would have one of the most successful pickup trucks in America right now. And I think like maybe if Elon is like spending a little less time like fighting the woke mind virus and trying to reinvent, he's this famously a first principles thinker, certain things, the way it's done is done that way for a reason. I think Tesla spent like basically no amount of time thinking about like, what do pickup truck drivers like? Why do they drive their pickup trucks? Who are they? Like I don't think they answered any of those questions. It's just like Elon wants to make a cool pickup truck. That's the plus side. The downside is RJ is not a charismatic figure. I mean, he's liked by his employees, but like to me, like he sort of talks like a consultant. He uses a lot of like businessy terms, and he talks like a guy, frankly, who's spent a lot of time in various boardrooms, pitching, and you have to be careful. And I think that has maybe limited, like it doesn't allow him to attract as much attention. He's not he's a visionary, I think, I would argue, but not in the Elon Musk visionary sense. But, maybe that's okay. I mean, I think Rivian is a bet that you can have like a normal car company and be successful, and that having a normal successful car company would be really good for the world. Would being if we're able to come up with like the electric Subaru or the electric Jeep or an electric truck that sells really well, like that would be great. And of course, Elon Musk has decided, somewhat famously, that he doesn't even want to think of Tesla as a car company, right? He wants to be a software company. So I think that's the divide, and I think it limits Rivian's upside, although it gets them out of this extremely high leverage, high risk bet that Tesla's currently in.
That was Max Chafkin talking to us about Rivian. And the coolest thing, Hannah, that you're going to get to drive the newer version of the Rivian R1S. By the way, I don't like the pickup truck. Like, I feel that if it's not luxury, at least it's like a special vehicle, like it's a third car.
Yes.
And
Yeah.
I don't need that to be a pickup. Like I'll have my pickup be one of my first two. So I like
Makes sense.
the SUV better, and I'm pretty excited to hear what you think about this new version because I think they've updated a lot, including even like the power delivery.
I really think they have. Admittedly, the truck that I drove was a very early example. So yeah, I haven't driven the SUV, and this is the second generation. It's their second generation R1. It's the dual motor. There's going to be a tri-motor coming out in the fall that I'm also going to drive, but I'm really looking forward to it.
And then a quad, eventually a quad motor with over 1,000 horsepower. That's it for us this week. Be sure to email us because we thrive off your attention. And what's our email address? hotpursuit@bloomberg.net. And
yes,
we will respond, and we also take suggestions. And that's all I got. I'm Matt Miller.
And I'm Hannah Elliott, and this is Bloomberg.